Hello, ladies and gents. Hope you're well. Hope you had a fantastic day so far. This week, I was given the wonderful opportunity to be able to talk to Lauren Day. Now, Lauren Day is a management accountant, and she helps people with day-to-day managing of their finance. I know, a very interesting and exciting topic for you this week, but a very important one, I feel, as we are entering some economic challenges, and I thought I would bring on her to have a conversation. So I'm now going to hand over to her to explain a little bit more about what she does, but I hope you take value from this interview, and I'll see you in just a moment.
Hi, everybody. My name's Laura, and my business is called Laurel Finance. I'm a management accountant, which means that I am proactive in helping business owners achieve their business goals, looking at their processes and numbers throughout the year in order to get their business working the best way it can.
Fantastic. Thanks, Laura, for the time and coming on. I really appreciate it. And I think the first question, that jumps down to me is what sets you apart from what I'm going to call a traditional accountant, right? Because I think so many people are going to think, but I've already got an accountant, or I'm already using an accountant, or I'm, potentially going to be having an accountant. So why would someone either look to choose you, or could they have an accountant and you? What's the difference in layman's terms?
Definitely. That's a great question. And I think that I would work in tandem with a traditional accountant. So traditional accountant is what springs to mind as soon as you say the A word. So an accountant that prepares your year-end accounts, they prepare your tax return, make sure you're paying the appropriate amount of tax, all that good stuff. And I don't really deal with any of that, to be honest. So I focus more on the numbers and the business. So yes, it's important to get your bookkeeping right, to make sure the information going to your statutory accountant is correct. But we can also use that information to look at trends or patterns within your business, or to analyze where things are perhaps not performing as well as they could be, or where things are performing really well and we want to boost that. So it's more of a throughout the year approach to accounting, having an understanding and an interest in your business as it goes along the day to day. So as opposed to just waiting to the year end and thinking, oh yeah, that was a good year, or oh god, that wasn't a good year. We work together to see how things are going throughout the year and make it as good as we can.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, right? Because I think so many people, they think about a business and they go, right, I need to make money, sure. But then they kind of do a lot of stuff. They get to the end of the year and they go, right, did we make any money? Traditionally. And I think for me, something which has allowed me personally to... I've been quite fortunate in the respect to my brain is quite analytical in the respect to the way it's wired. So it kind of allows me to go, right, okay, I kind of know where we are. What would you say to people who are maybe going through some harder times, or they are, starting out in business, maybe they're not getting the traction they feel they need, or specifically they're in a position where they're not 100% comfortable with where they are with their finances, like whether that's legitimately maybe they're not making what they expected or what they needed to, but also, just making themselves more aware or educating themselves a little bit more on where, so they can kind of know where they are, right? Is there tools? Is there things that that are free resources, etc.? How would you recommend someone starts if they don't have a handle on their finances or don't have that kind of way of thinking to really start showcasing or looking to understand, I guess the best terminology would be to find what's either wrong or what's going really.
So you're lucky that you've got an analytical mind and you kind of understand where you are, because there's lots of people that don't. And the thought of looking at numbers is either terrifying, intimidating, boring, combination of the above. So this is a great question. In order to identify how you're doing, you need to keep a track of how you're doing. So at the most basic level, that's keeping a track of your incomings and your outgoings. That's going to give you the most basic idea of how you have performed up until now. So resources for that could include an Excel spreadsheet. Obviously, accountants love Excel, so shout out to Excel. But there's slightly more all-encompassing software that you could use for your bookkeeping and for your VAT returns and all things like that. So I shout out a couple: Xero, QuickBooks Online, Sage have got an online. And just by keeping up to date with your bookkeeping and recording your income and your expenditure, that will give you a good base level of where you are now. So in these software programs, if you choose to go for one, if you're VAT registered, I think you almost have to go for one as an aside, to comply with regulations. But they'll chuck out loads of reports as well. So you can have a look at your profit and loss to see how much profit you've made. You can look at the money that's in your bank now. That, you know, cash is king. So keeping an eye on the cash balance is so important. Anything more than that, you start to get into sort of strategic analysis, which you can look up online. There's loads of articles about how to start looking forward. So understanding your base level is really important, but to start looking forward and planning for the future is taking it to the next level.
I mean, something that I was told very early on, I mean, I think I wasn't even in business at the time, was, as you say, cash is king, but sometimes we misunderstand what that means. I mean, from my perspective, one-on-one finance, you know, have some level of emergency pot, right? Now, there's a lot of conversation at the moment around risk profiles and like what people have, but I mean, for me anyway, having a risk profile is good to know because it allows you to, you know, when the going is tough, so to speak, can you produce the results, right? Like, I'm sure there's a lot of businesses, and I know I've been there in my career, where it's kind of this situation where, yes, I'm fine right now, but I need to make something happen in the next couple of weeks, or I'm going to be in hot water. Yeah. I mean, what level of kind of like mindset or like just trusting in yourself does one have to have in your experience? I mean, this is like a broader question, not necessarily related to finance, but I think it's an important one still to answer or still to ask, because so many businesses are unfortunately going through troubled times right now. They're going through maybe something that's quite challenging, specifically, whether that's a cash flow issue or a simple work issue or a combination of the above. And I think, you know, for me, I always try to see what value can be added from experts that I bring on, right? And I think from your perspective, I mean, what can people be looking out for? What can they be specifically doing if they are in a quote-unquote do or die situation?
Oof, do or die. That's not a good place to be in, is it? The first step to that, I think, is recognizing that you're in a do or die situation. So if you have got a couple of weeks, a couple of months, whatever buffer to realize that you're in this situation or heading towards this situation, that's about the best position you can be in if you're finding yourself heading for do or die. So always trying to look forward is really important. And if you see you're coming towards a do or die, then you can look to see how you can mitigate these things. So whether there's, I don't know, for example, a line of products that's loss making, you might decide to make the choice to just cut that line and not produce it anymore. You can save costs that way. Whether it's looking at external finance, which is a good option if this is just a sort of momentary blip that you need a bit of help with and you're going to be able to get back on track running and pay back these finance costs in the future, then external finance can be a good way forward. But definitely looking forward and realizing you're heading for a situation is key, is really important.
I mean, I think for me, I mean, like, I remember multiple times, unfortunately, where I've been what I would describe as do or die. And, you know, for me, it's this kind of proactive versus reactive mindset and what you're actually doing. And I think, of course, we can look at it from a financial point of view in respect to like borrowing money to bridge the gap or etc. But also there is just a certain level of you just have to do it. You know, I was having a one-to-one this afternoon, and, you know, one of the key takeaways from that, and I'll mention it here because I think it's valuable, is that marketing is your long-term kind of people coming to you aspect, whatever your marketing terminology is, or however you're doing that, whether it's through marketing content, radio ads, etc., or a combination of both. That's your kind of long-term people come to me when they're ready kind of thing. If you're in a do-or-die situation, to be honest, doing marketing is probably not the best option for you at that time, because marketing takes time for firstly understand the audience we're targeting, but also secondly to be able to, yeah, you probably shouldn't stop it, but that shouldn't be your main focus. Your main focus should be doing sales, because sales is the thing that actually allows you to generate revenue for your business, like solely. And all that marketing is going to do is facilitate more sales in the
Agreed, but perhaps potentially further down the line, like you're saying, marketing is the long game. So boosting sales revenue, definitely very important. But I would also add onto that that reducing your costs where you can is just as important. So if you've got a load of software that you're paying monthly that you don't actually use, then cut that out, get rid of it. Have a real good look at all your overheads, and trim the fat where you can, because I think a lot of people will be surprised how much money they're wasting on things like that, and that can help your profitability and cash flow as much as boosting the sales in some
Yeah,
cases.
I mean, yeah, you're completely right, and it's a really valid point, actually, isn't it? I mean, something that I am in the habit of doing, so I kind of forget that it's a thing you should do, is doing a financial audit, which is going through every single penny that I spend and saying, why are you spending that? Why do I have this subscription? Why do I have that subscription? Etc. Are you using those things? And it's not to say you need to drastically, don't have Netflix, don't have this, don't have a gym subscription. It's not saying that. It's just pointing out and saying to yourself, which ones are you using? Which ones are valuable amounts of money? And maybe you could utilize, a gym subscription, for example. If you're going once a week, it's the same cost per month. So if you go more, it's actually per trip, it becomes less, right?
Yeah.
So maybe the better idea is actually maybe either think, okay, do I want to increase how much I go, right? Which in then turn makes it more valuable for the money, or do I maybe cut it off for a couple of months to cut that expense, right?
Yeah, or go for a pay as you go. If you're only going to go every now and then, just pay the 4 or 5 quid each time you go.
Absolutely, and I think there's lots of. I mean, there's lots we could talk about here. I mean, specifically, but when it comes to your role specifically in a business, I mean, how would you say people should look to potentially facilitate their growth in, say, the next quarter to quarter and a half? Because I think there's a lot of people who are going to be looking at Christmas, or going to be looking at the new year, and going to be saying, there's a lot of talk at the moment around we don't know what's coming, we don't know how bad it's going to be, we don't, etc., etc., etc. And of course, there's a level of like financial planning and financial bits that you can do.
Yeah.
But I mean, how from your role? I mean, what are you helping your clients with at the moment? Like, what strategies and stuff? Obviously, don't disclose anything you don't feel comfortable with. But I think it's an interesting one because people who aren't necessarily financially minded, it may open up doors or ideas for them, and that's the reason why I asked the question.
So working on at the moment with one client, cash flow forecasting, which is quite important. They found themselves in a bit of a squeaky situation, shall we say, a few months in a row. So I came in and we've set up a monthly cash flow forecasting cycle. So taking in forecasts from the main people that bring money in, as well as looking at all of the prospective money going out to see where they're likely to be. And we've also come up with a few strategies to help them get money in quicker. So, for example, they've introduced interim billing. So, not just waiting until the end of a project to send a bill out, sort of quarter of the way through, halfway through, perhaps even upfront in some occasions, invoicing, and that brings the cash in earlier. And that's absolutely eased their situation, their cash situation. So, they know going forward they'll be able to pay for their VAT bill, pay for their wages bill, and it won't be so scary at the end of the month. Another project that I'm working on with a different business at the moment, it's a larger business, and it's sort of grown from an owner managed business into all sorts of different branches linked together, but distinctive different branches. And we're implementing cost centers. By way of introducing cost centers is to tag everything for cost center A as relating to cost center A. So all the sales, all of the costs to do with that center are tagged separately, A, B, C, D, so you can see how each different area is performing. And therefore, the manager of each of those centres has their own sort of pocket of responsibility, their own pocket of information that they can look at, and each boost their own cost centre for the better of the whole. So that's quite an interesting one, getting that mindset of thinking of it as almost mini different businesses within the one business has been really interesting as well.
I mean, something that I think is worthwhile mentioning as well is just I think there's a level of discipline when we're self-employed, right? Because we get taxed on the back end, we get taxed on our earnings. It doesn't come out before we see it. The same with VAT, the same with this, the same with that. And I've talked to many business owners who do have these tax bills, do have these VAT bills, the same with everyone. and they haven't put money aside, or they haven't had the right strategic processes in place internally within their bank, and or themselves manually doing it, so that they potentially are then in a more sticky situation. I mean, from my understanding, it's quite simple to just have a separate account to be like, this is the VAT money, this is the tax money, right? And I think it's just about to set up the processes for that to auto happen, right? Let's say you make £1,000. Okay, you know that there's going to be a certain amount of VAT on that. You know the likelihood is there's a certain amount of tax probably needs to come from that. So arguably, shouldn't someone who's setting up a business or a business banker, etc., just look to, instantly the second it hits the account, move that portion of the bill out of the way somewhere else, that then it's just not touched until it comes to time to pay the tax man, or etc.
It's a great idea, and absolutely I wholeheartedly recommend doing that. But you were saying just move it over. I think people struggle with keeping on top of these things. Like you say, if you're a real habitual person and the money comes in, you're like, right, I know that's not all mine and I'll take it out. That's easy. But if you're so caught up in taking customers' money, making sure the supplier's made whilst you're building whatever else and managing this team, it's something that can slip. So absolutely, if there's an automated way of doing that, I'd recommend doing it. And if possible, to get in the habit of doing it, perhaps not every single payment, but perhaps just look at your rough sort of monthly figures, and put it aside, because as you say, it will save so much stress and hassle if you know you've got this pot that you can call upon when these fees become due.
I think, it kind of comes back to like investing in general, right? Long term, I think, there's so many people I could quote here, so I won't bother quoting them, but it's one of those things where it's like you take 20% for the tax man from everything you make, for example, or 30 or 40 or whatever, then you take another 10-15% for VAT or etc., then you take another 20 to 30% to invest personally, and then you have 20% to actually use, and then you just sit on the rest, right? For example, that could be a way to break it down. Of course, everyone's different in regards to the percentage balance, but I think for me that's by no means am I 100% immune to this issue at all, either. But I think for me personally, it's one of the reasons why I've been very aware of where we are, financially wise. As I say, I'm very blessed to be analytically minded. So it's like, right, okay. Technically, I'll give you an example. We will always ask for 50% up front for any project that we do, and instantly, that the second that money hits my account, it goes into my payment account, and then it goes out of my payment account within minutes, because it's not my money. Until the project has actually been shot, it's not my money, right? So even if it's a deposit, and even if it's sat there, it moves into a separate account, and then I move it back in when it's technically my money. And even then, I may distribute it differently when it becomes back in, as well. From your perspective, what are the common challenges that people, especially when they start out, are facing with finance? Is it just they feel overwhelmed and they don't want to look at it because they're worried that, oh my god, I haven't made money, oh my god, I'm going to run into debt, oh my god, I'm going to quote unquote go out of business, or etc. They're worried about that, so they would rather, I don't want to say put their head in the sand, but put their head in the sand.
Yeah, absolutely. Starting out is tricky, isn't it? So you've got all these loads of different things to be thinking about. You're trying to get up and running. You've got this brilliant idea. People should be bashing your door down and it should be selling like hotcakes, but it doesn't always necessarily work like that. And that can bring, feelings of stress, feelings of you're not good enough. And it takes a real strength of character to continue. You know you've got a good idea. You know you're going to get there. Perhaps you need some outside help with your marketing or selling or whatever it is. But to continue through that pinch point is really important. Yeah, sorry.
It's all
Yeah.
right. No, it's fine. I think for me, as I say, I think it's something which you kind of have to just face up to. And I think what jumped to mind as you were just talking was the focus element. I mean, like, I think everyone's in the position where they're kind of questioning whether they're gonna have this expected, what they would expect in a September at the moment because of everything going on in the world. From what I've gathered from the conversations I've had and the people I've spoken to, and from my understanding, you're also quite new in, not in what you're doing, but as a kind of standalone entity, so to speak. I mean, how has your kind of, I guess, sales and marketing journey been? Because I think for me, as someone who helps people with sales and marketing and showcases others, I think it's something that sometimes I take for granted, that I understand all the fundamentals of the inner workings of it. So how is and or was your starting journey when it comes to, say, pricing or say articulating that to a client or a
So I've
potential
been
client?
quite, yes, no, definitely. I've been quite lucky. I've joined a what would they be, like a consultancy group, I guess. And we're all like-minded management accountants, and they've been invaluable, really. So there's all sorts of people there that have been there, done that for 20 years, or people that are just sort of starting out, similar to me. So they've been really useful to have this network of people that are offering the same services as I am, and garnering all sorts of knowledge from them. So that's been really useful with regards to things such as pricing, because management accountant, I can look at someone else's business and know exactly what I should be charging. But for my own prices, it was useful to have a little bit of help just to make sure I was in the right sort of ballpark. Um, Sales and marketing, you're quite right. I've touched upon it in my study book, so I know about sales and marketing, but actually putting it into place myself, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work with my brain. So, leaving that to the guys that know how to do sales and marketing. To start with, I tried to do a bit myself, and it didn't really pay off. I think if your strengths don't lie with something, then dish it out as quickly as you can. If you can afford to, then that's probably the way to go. So I've had some great help with my website, putting myself out there and getting myself advertised. I've had some help with, and I've also found networking to be really useful as well, to get me out there as a person, which I think is so important when you're in a business where you want to work with a specific kind of person. You're not just sending out products that anyone can consume. It's quite important to meet people so that they know what you're about, you know what they're about, and networking has been brilliant for that.
I think it's an interesting point, right? Because I think so many people, they have this illusion sometimes that just because you're skilled at marketing and sales, it suddenly means you're going to be really profitable. Just because you understand the fundamentals doesn't mean necessarily that you're willing to do the amount of volume, right? And and the reason why it jumped to mind, as you were mentioning just then, is I think it's important to sometimes, it kind of leads on to the next question I was going to ask you, which was around taking on debt or taking on potential, a loan or etc. to grow the business quickly. Let's say, for example, someone's listening to this and they are in the same boat as you, right? They were concerned around sales and marketing. They don't really know necessarily what they're going to do about it or how to do it necessarily really well. What would you say to people who are maybe concerned because they can't afford to, they're like, it's a chicken and egg situation, right? Because I need to make money to then pay someone to do it, but I can't pay someone to do it until I've got the clients and I don't get the clients, and so on, right? I mean, how did you sort of work on that from a mindset point of view to be like, could you afford it from the beginning? And then if so, like, how did that kind of story happen for you? Because I think there's a lot of people who would love to have a outsourced marketing department or people that are marketing minded or sales minded, etc., to help, but they don't necessarily either know who they are and or don't have the finance.
Yeah, of course, that's the gold standard, isn't it? To have a marketing department and they're chucking your product worldwide and the sales orders are coming in. But it's not how it goes for a lot of startup businesses. So I think it's important to work within your means to a standard. So I was lucky I could afford sales and marketing, but I hadn't prioritized it enough. So I went chasing sort of other bits and pieces that weren't really providing much value. And it took me a few months to realize that sales and marketing is where I need to be, to get the clients in, to get the money in that I've invested in the sales and marketing. So absolutely, it's a chicken and egg situation. What you can do, jumping back to a sort of financy mindset, is if you're looking to get external finance, you can have a look at how much finance you think you're going to need. You're going to be using loans or whatever, and you can check your payback period. So if you're running some sort of marketing campaign or employing somebody to help you with this, they should have an idea of the expected return on investment, basically. So if you know how much you want to borrow and you know how much custom you're likely to get from the marketing campaign, you can work out if you can afford it based on that external finance versus the income you're likely to receive and the timeframes as well. Remembering that you need to pay interest on any loan, so it's going to be slightly more expensive than just paying back what you've borrowed. Equally, there's all sorts of help out there for startups. There's various grants, reliefs, things like that, depending on what business you're in. I'd recommend looking on the government website or local business website and finding any sort of grants or schemes that are out there that might suit your business to help you grow for less cost than taking money from the bank.
I think there's a level of the risk, right, that comes with that, right? Because I think, we can do as marketers, we can do our best job as possible, but there's other factors that are completely out of our control. I'll give you an example: COVID or the living crisis at the moment, right? Like you could have the most incredible marketing campaign, and COVID hits, and no one's spending money. So it's like, well, this is a bit awkward. I mean, I think, personally, like, have you had your own, I guess, riskier steps that have either potentially backfired, or how have you sort of, because I think one of the questions that so many business owners start out with, and the same is obviously true when you're investing, one looks where to have a kind of risk profile understanding, right? What is one's risk profile? But for layman's terms, what in your explanation is a risk profile, and then how do you kind of tailor that and or use it within a business in your experience?
Okay, so risk profiles, you can get people that are real risk takers and they love to, if there's perhaps a small chance they might make money on something or other, they go for it wholehearted and they cannot wait to get stuck in. And if it pays off, you're going to have massive returns. And if it flops, you're probably going to have massive losses. So, but they don't mind that. They're in it for the risk and they'll keep going. And the ones that pay off will probably cover the ones that flop. Completely opposite to that, you have risk averse people that just really play it safe. So they will find something that works and probably just keep going along that same path because it works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And you can have, of course, an amalgamation of the two. So you've got your path, you're quite happy, but you see an opportunity that might pay off. And then you can weigh up whether you want to go and take the risk. You're probably more likely to calculate that it will work in your favor if you're a risk averse person. So you've done your calculations, you take your little risk and it pays off and you carry on like that. So two different risk profiles. I naturally, as a person, am risk adverse. So I like to plan everything and know what's going to happen. I'm quite organized and structured. But what I've realized in business is that you need to take these risks sometimes. So by virtue of the fact that I have started up my own business, was risk number one, and at the moment it's paying off. I didn't particularly enjoy the prospect of networking to start with, but I thought I have got to get out there and meet people, so let's go. And that was risk number two, and that's paid off. So although I'm naturally a risk averse person, I think in business it does sometimes pay off to take these risks, and they might sound like small risks to anybody listening, but it was quite a step out of my comfort zone to do these things. So it's a good place to be if you can step out of your comfort zone. But I'm definitely more on the calculated side of risk. Absolutely.
I think there's a level, I mean, how I've looked at it always is there's a kind of, do you believe in yourself, and then having your own self experience to say whether you're going to get through it or not, right? Because psychologically, as humans, we will be really worried and concerned about something that we don't have evidence to prove that we don't die from, right? That simple fact, that's what our brain does, right? Because at the end of the day, our brain's job is to keep us alive, right? So when someone looks at doing networking for the first time, their brain's going, right, I'm going to look into the past and say, have I done this before? No. Okay, so it must kill me, right? So that's the assumption our brain makes, right? And then after you've done networking or speaking in front of a room or being in camera or interviewing someone on a podcast or being on a podcast yourself, etc., whatever it is, your brain gets the evidence to go, actually, me doing this thing, whatever it may be, is not going to mean I die, and the world does not end if something goes wrong here. So actually now it's becoming inside my comfort zone. And something that I've always tried to do as someone who's trying to grow is trust in maybe the ability. I'll give you an example of like the finance situation that we opened the conversation with. If I feel like could do with probably about £1,000 more than I currently have, okay, I trust myself to be able to find the job just through sheer, in some ways, brute force, in other ways, understanding the market, finding the client, going through the volume of conversations I need to have to find the one person who is at the right time and that I can offer something that is really valuable to them and they're potentially going to pay me £1,000 plus for, right? Yeah. But that only comes from my level of experience in doing it for the years I've been doing it, right? So something which I would suggest people listening here, if they are starting out or they are worried about that, is to not push yourself as hard as maybe you're seeing me push myself or you're seeing someone else push themselves. Because the thing is that you need to appreciate is, I had this interesting reality the other day where I was used to working 12 to 15 hours and I suddenly realized I'm only working 9. And I was like, I feel like I'm slacking. I feel like I'm not doing anything. Right, but to everyone else who's maybe used to working 7 or 8 or etc. and hasn't really worked 10, and maybe doesn't normally work through weekends, me working 9, 6 to 7 days a week is a massive thing for them because it's not in their comfort zone. But for me, it's actually quite chill because I'm used to working 12 to 12, 13, or maybe 14 hours, 6 days a week. So it's like actually. This is what I mean by your own yardstick, and this is why I think sometimes we either don't trust ourselves when we are taking a risk, or we don't articulate to ourselves that we actually do know and we do have all the solutions. And yes, the situation is maybe slightly more challenging, but something that I took from the pandemic or the lockdown stages that we had was actually, yes, it's harder, but the opportunities will still be there. You just need to think a bit more strategically and maybe work slightly harder to actually get the same level of opportunity. But also the situation that I think is going to happen soon, and I've been talking to some clients about it, is there's going to be an opportunity during this economic challenge. Unfortunately, there's going to be businesses who aren't going to make it. And that for the ones who do stay and can stay around and can sustain, they're going to be in a land grab opportunity to be able to take more market share and or be able to grow, because there is going to be that space. I mean, are you preparing for that as a like, hey, look, there's a growth opportunity here? Or are you, being risk averse? Are you playing it safe and going, actually, I just need to weather this storm and actually get through this, and I'm not going to maybe take as many risks or any at all?
Yeah, I'm weathering the storm camp. I think for me, the position I'm in at the moment, I'm not in the position for world domination anyway. So I'm going to weather the storm, hang around, and be there for these businesses that do jump in and take market share. They're going to have huge unexpected growth and think, oh God, now I've got numbers and figures and staff and whatever coming out my ears. I don't know what to do with it. So I will have weathered and I'd be ready there to pick them up when that time comes. But yeah, you're absolutely right. If people or businesses are looking for expansion, sadly, like you say, it could be a really good opportunity for them off the back of businesses that weren't strong enough or strategic enough to make it through.
I think there's a level, I mean, something that I've always followed is like the best defense is your offense, right? Like, for me, it's something that I've always followed, and it's given me this kind of, I guess, fire or this passion or this like, some will call it a stubbornness to not die, right? But I think for me, it's always about saying and looking at every situation that you have and say, okay, well, maybe there's not a commercial benefit here, but actually maybe there is a marketing spin, or maybe there's a collaboration effort or something else. And I think sometimes why people maybe don't do that, even though it'd be really beneficial for them long-term, mid-term, or short-term, is because they're not willing to do the extra effort or do the extra reps, so to speak, that will actually help them facilitate that. It's like, I mean, I give you an example of like networking, right? Like we can join 15 networks, but if we only show up to 2 meetings, we're probably not going to get much out of it, right? And it's the same whenever you do anything with marketing and sales. The more, if you're all in, again, it's kind of down to your risk profile, I guess, to an extent. But for me, I've always kind of been all in, because it's like I went into business because I wanted to be all in. So why am I now not being all in? Because now is the time I should be all in, because I need it to work, because I don't have another option excluding the income that my business can provide me with. Right now, that means you probably need to be intelligent with like how you actually allocate your revenue, so you've got that emergency fund where needed, of course. And I'm not saying be drastic, but I'm saying be very aware and being very trusting of yourself in regards to the results you can potentially create for yourself once you set your mind to it. And, you know, I'm conscious of time, so, you know, let's wrap up soonish. But I think for me, it's about, as I say, creating that focus. And I think so much of our lives, and I mean, we live on social media in some ways, and it's kind of a counterintuitive thing if you're being a consumer, because the problem is social media is designed to take your attention, and every single business should be leveraging it for attention as a creator. But also that requires a level of discipline to not be distracted by it, right? I mean, what's your thoughts on like creating content consistently? Do you do it? If you do, how do you kind of control that you're not going to go to LinkedIn to post your article or your video or etc. and then like you find actually 20 minutes have passed because you spent scrolling the feed?
It's a familiar situation. Yeah, I must admit I've fallen into that one, definitely. Um, like you say, you need to show up and you need to consistently show up. I'm not a huge social media person. In fact, I had to delete Facebook off my phone because I did just spend hours scrolling, and that's not helpful for anybody. So that's gone. But LinkedIn posts, I've made a real conscious effort to post once or twice a week, which is, you know, quite a big step from me, and to keep it happy and to keep it engaging as well. So I started out saying, these are the benefits of a business plan, and all fabulous benefits, and absolutely everybody should have a business plan, but it's not really gonna get people to engage with me or want to possibly read on, because it sounds a bit boring, to be honest. If you don't have me there to talk you through it and highlight why it's so impressive, then it's not really going to work. So yeah, I've switched my style, kept it a bit more chatty, informal, tag other people in just to get some engagement going. I do have Facebook on my laptop, so I can go onto Facebook for business purposes and put posts on there as well, just to try and catch a different audience, a more informal audience perhaps than you might find on LinkedIn.
I think that's a really important point about, you know, choosing a device and only having it on that device, right? Because there's two ways around it. Either you develop a ridiculous amount of discipline just to do, right, what am I here for? I'm going to do this and then I'm going to leave. Because you have to fight how the platform is designed, right? Because you need to remember the platform is designed to take your attention and for you to consume content on it. That's the whole point. That's why we're even trying to put content on there in the first place, right? But if you actually have it on less devices, you're then less likely to be in a position where you go, I'm sure everyone's had this, where they open up and go, why was I on Facebook? Why did I go to LinkedIn? Why did I open TikTok? Yeah. I think there's a difference between doing market research and trying to engage in other people, like allocating time, for example, on LinkedIn. And I'd recommend everyone does this, to allocate some time a day to actually go and engage with your community or your connections posts and say, hey, I really like this, or hey, you know, I'm going to add value in the comment section, I'm going to comment on some posts, like some posts, etc. That's not the same as I'm going to sit here and consume.
Well, yeah,
right? Agreed. I mean, TikTok is notoriously known for this because it's an infinite scrolling addictive feed. That is what it's designed to do. But I think if you know how to leverage it and you can create content that sits in that feed, it can be very valuable for a business. I mean, that's kind of everything I wanted to talk about today, but is there anything specifically that you either had a question for me or a topic you want to throw in just before we end off?
I just want to say thank you for having me on here. I think we've touched on a lot of different subjects, so possibly to be continued.
Absolutely. I mean, as a final question, I think if you could only advise someone to do one thing differently in the next quarter, from your perspective, what one piece of advice would you give?
Look forward. See where you're headed. That's my one piece of advice. And then all sorts of things spin off of that, but be forward looking.
And for those who have really enjoyed this conversation, they want to connect with you, they want to talk about maybe your services, they want to hear more from you, they want to continue this conversation, where's best for them?
www.laurelfinance.co.uk, or find me on LinkedIn, Laura Day.
Thank you for coming back, ladies and gents. I hope you took value from this episode. If you did, I would love to hear what you think in the comment section down below. And if you'd like to hear how video can help your business in 2022, then make sure to find my information somewhere around this video. And I'll see you very